Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Hope you are all well. In this video we are going to be repairing this Xbox One S which has got a no video output error. So once all the cables are connected up and it's switched on, there is no video output to the TV or monitor. Now you might have seen some of my other videos which show you how to repair these kind of faults. However, in this video we are going to do something slightly different and we are going to try a way of replacing the retimer IC on the motherboard in a slightly different way, and in my opinion a slightly easier way. So as I say, once this Xbox is connected up, there's no video output at all, nothing at all on the monitor. The actual monitor says no video input on the HDMI channel. Now I've had a quick look at the HDMI port without opening up, and it actually looks fine, to be honest. So there's no issue with the HDMI ports. We'll quickly check it once we've got the Xbox opened up. So let's get this Xbox opened up so we can have a look inside it. Now opening these up, relatively straightforward. I like to start at the rear here. Normally there's a warranty sticker. This Xbox has already been opened. So what you need to do is get a pry tool and start in this bottom corner here. So I use a tool like this. Get it underneath the black plastic, and then you can start to slide that white bit of casing down, or the black plastic over the white casing I should say, and then I work down the sides, just popping the case off like so as I go, and as you can see they start popping off. Move over to this side, wedge your pry tool into the corner like so, give it a bit of a twist and it will start popping. Now once you get round to the front, very similar, just get right into the corner, pop it off, then move your pry tool all the way around and start popping it off. It sounds like it's going to break. I have had a few of them break before, and I thought it will pop. So this one has obviously been opened up before, so we put that to one side. And then we have got, spin it around the right way, a number of green screws. Yeah, this one's definitely been opened up, it's not even been tightened up. Number of green screws, like so. So you need to get a screwdriver with a T9 bit in it, and then you can remove the green screws. There's 6 of them in total, so they'll come out. And as we are removing the motherboard, we actually do need to remove all of these screws, because some of them hold the hard drive, some of them hold the motherboard in, some of them hold the DVD and power supply, so they all need to come out. So remove all the silver screws. Now we need to remove these black screws here which hold the heatsink down to the base unit. Now these are T8s, so if you replace your drill bits to T8, they come as well. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, easiest way to do this, flip the Xbox over. Now from the rear of the Xbox, pull outwards like so, pulling that way, and then lifting it and give it a bit of a wiggle, and the lid lifts off like so to the front. Now we have this RF gasket, so literally just pull that off, simple like that. And then we can start actually seeing the components. So we've got a hard drive, optical drive, our fan, which is filthy, and power supply. There is a Wi-Fi card here to the rear and the power board there to the front. They also need to come off as well. These are the black screws on here. So 3 screws on the Wi-Fi card. 3, try not to drop them like I am. And then the Wi-Fi card, just pull away and off it comes. power board, 4 screws on there, the black type. Would be so much easier if I didn't have to hold it as well for the camera. And 4. Just gather up those screws. And then the power board, just like the Wi-Fi card, just pull it off gently and off it will pop like so. And then you can actually take out your components. So easy way to do it, start with the hard drive, put your finger in there, and that just pops off like so. Now there's 2 cables, a power cable and a data cable. Put your fingers down by the connectors and just pull the connectors up. Try not to, when you're doing it, wiggle them too much. If you wiggle them like so, then you're at risk of breaking the actual sockets on the motherboard. DVD optical drive next. Same 2 cables, power and data. Off they come. And then comes your DVD drive. Power supply. This is connected down here by the side. And there's an actual little lug on the side of the connector. So what I like to do is just get my pry tool again, and you'll see there's a little lug. I just push the lug back like so, and then just wiggle the cable, and then it pops off like that. Then your power supply pops out like so. Okay. Now we're free to remove the motherboard. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot. Just on the front here is the screw guide, so take that out. And then just to the front here as well is a little RF gasket over the USB socket. What I normally do is just get my fingernail just behind it, give it a bit of a twist, and off it pops. Like so. Just bend it out and you can bend it back again. Okay, so now we're free to remove the motherboard. What I normally do is just grab the processor, the fan, sorry, lift up the motherboard, give it a bit of a wiggle, and pull the motherboard out like so. Remove the bottom case, turn the motherboard upside down, and then you see this X bracket, very cool, which is basically holding the processor onto the motherboard. Now this can be a little bit tricky. So what I normally do is get a flat blade screwdriver and then just find one of these which has got a bit of a gap at the front of it. Put my flat blade screwdriver in and then just gently start prying it up. Now be really careful. If it feels like it's not going to go, move to another one. Be careful not to put too much pressure on it because you're at risk of slipping the screwdriver and the screwdriver is slicing across the motherboard and you knock off some of these components here, so be careful. So just move around so you find one that's relatively loose. There's always one, like so. Give it a bit of wiggle, that one popping up, and obviously as you get more of them popped up, the easier it comes. So spin it around, give this one a bit of a wiggle, like so. If that one comes in, then basically you can wiggle the rest of it off. Turn the motherboard upside down while holding the fan still, because that's still connected to the motherboard by the power cable just down here. And again, get your fingers as close to the connector as possible and pull upwards, and the power will come off, and then you can remove the fan. So then we are down to the bare motherboard. Now there's a couple of bits around here. Here's the retimer chip. It's just located here at the rear of the motherboard. There's the HDMI port just here. So the area we need to focus on is this area here. So let's get under the microscope and take a look then. Right, so here we are under the microscope. Now what we can see here is the rear HDMI port. Now that is the one where you plug your TV into. So if we move down from that, we can see the actual pads which connect onto the motherboard. So what we're going to do is do a good old tweezer check. So we're just going to go along each leg and just give it a quick touch just to make sure it's not loose. It looks like this is the original HDMI port actually, so we shouldn't have any issues. Okay, So none of those legs are moving, which is a good sign. So the next thing to check is the filters. So if we move down to here, these two little devices here, they are the HDMI filters. So essentially they filter out anything which is coming from the processors and the HDMI retimer, which we'll get onto in a minute, before it goes out to your TV. Now what we need to do is put our multimeter in continuity mode. Just quickly touch your probes together just to make sure that you hear the beep, which you do, which is great, and then go along top to bottom on each leg just to make sure you get the beep from continuity. Do a quick cross check as well. It's good. That's good. That one's good. That one's good. 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 And good. So we know it's not the filters causing the issue. So, as I suspected, I think our problem child is this IC here, which is the HDMI Retimer. And as I said at the start of the video, we are going to quickly show you a different way of actually replacing this HDMI Retimer. I find it a little bit easier than some of the other methods which are shown on YouTube, and certainly from the other method that I had in my video. So what we need to do is get some flux on there so the solder melts nicely. By the looks of it, I think this HDMI Retimer has already been replaced, so we shall see. So let's get some flux. Now, just put it around the outside. Don't need loads this time, because we're just taking it off at the minute. We're going to give it a good clean up. Turn on your heat gun. Now I've got my heat gun set to 450 degrees centigrade, and the airflow is around 50%, so it's not full speed. So what we're going to do is just gently heat the IC. And eventually what you'll see is the solder itself, the actual pads, go quite silvery, and then the IC just pops off like so. Now what we're going to do is come in with soldering iron and some leaded solder. As I say, I think this retimer has been changed already, so it's probably got leaded solder on there already. So let's just make sure you cover the actual pads as well. So obviously you've got the big center grounding pad. Make sure you heat up the actual individual pads as well to make sure they get some solder on them. Stick quite a bit of solder on there, doesn't matter because it's coming off in a minute. Good. Then grab some desoldering wick. Now what I like to do is when I get my soldering wick, I just like to stick a little bit of flux on there. Grab my soldering iron and then come in with the soldering iron and then remove all of the solder again, like so. Make sure you cover all the pads and give it a good clean, like so. Then with some IPA, come in and clean the flux off. what I like to do is just go around the areas as well, because the flux does actually spread out quite a lot, and before you know it you've got flux all over the place. Now, where this method is different from the other videos you've seen on YouTube, and certainly my last video I did on this, is instead of just putting some flux down and then pushing the IC down and heating it up, we're actually going to cover the pads with some solder paste. Now, this is essentially flux, but it also has tiny little balls of solder in it as well. Now, you don't need much at all, you just need a tiny little bit in each area, and we're just going to dab it like so. Put a blob in the middle as well, and then we'll come in with our brush and just spread that out a little bit. Like so. Let's just spread it out a bit. You can actually get templates, which makes adding solder paste a hell of a lot easier than this method, but I actually haven't got a template for this IC. I'm just going to take a little bit off the center pad and just give it over here. Right, so the paste is just covering the pads like so. Then we're going to grab our new retimer and pop it into place. Obviously there's a little dot on the left hand side you can see there, which corresponds to the dot on the motherboard. Now we're just going to drop it in place, but what we're going to do quickly is just rub it around the paste a little bit like so, so it gets covered in some paste. And then this time we're just gonna roughly line it up. Now, the reason I find this method a lot easier is the solder paste actually heats up, and as I say, it's got tiny little microscopic balls of solder in it, and with surface tension it actually jumps onto the pads on the motherboard, but also onto the pads on the actual retimer IC as well. So you kind of know that you're always going to get a good join between the IC and the motherboard, because the solder paste does pretty much all of the work for you. So just make sure that's roughly in line, and then what we're going to do is get our heat gun, same temperature at 450, and we're going to start with the heat gun really quite high up away from the IC, right? Because all we want to do at the minute is just gently warm the area. Okay, so I'm not going anywhere near the IC at the minute. All I'm trying to do is just heat the solder paste, and what you'll see it take and start to get to its melting temperature and melt. So I'm using circular motions, as you can see. I'm still quite far away from the IC. As you see, it starts to melt, and the pads then start to draw the solder in. So gently get closer and closer. When you see surface tension there, just grab the IC and pull it into the pads. Now I can get a little bit more closer and then keep heating. Now I'm relatively quite close. I'm just going to carry on heating just so that big grounding pad in the middle gets some heat as well. And then we're going to finish off with just very gently resting our tweezers on the IC and giving it a little bit of a push and removing the heat, like so. Now, as you can see at the top here, there's some additional solder that we need to remove, and what we need to do is just check all the way around that the pads are kind of connected up to each pad on the IC itself, and they all look quite good. So I'm just going to come in with a soldering iron, and I'm just literally going to dab that excess solder at the top. Move it away like so. Always give your tip a good clean as well. There we go. I'm just going around and just checking all of these pads here have the right solder on. Now what I'm actually doing is just heating the motherboard pad itself, just to make sure the solder's good. Just quickly tidy these up a little bit. And then what I like to do is just go around, just check round each side. As you can see on this side, they're all connected to the pads on the IC. Again, from that side, all nicely connected. On that side, all nicely connected as well. Right, okay, so now what we need to do is give it a bit of a clean up, get rid of any additional flux that's on the motherboard, pop it back into the chassis, and then give it a test. Right, so I've just temporarily reassembled the Xbox back into the motherboard. I've only done it temporarily just in case it doesn't work, so we can give it a quick test. One thing to call out, just watched back the footage from the microscope. Apologies for the quality of that footage. I actually think I need to purchase myself a new camera for my microscope. The quality of that's not that great. Anyhow, let's try powering this up and see what we get. So we've got a white light, which is good. Fan spin, even better. And then we have a display. Perfect. Right, so that's worked. So I'm going to power this off because I haven't actually got any thermal paste on the processor or heatsink. Great. Okay, now let's reassemble the Xbox properly. Right, so now we know our fix has worked. So our retimer chip is working nicely. We can reassemble the Xbox. So what we need to do is start off by cleaning off the thermal paste, the old thermal paste which is on the processor, and the old thermal paste which is on the heatsink. So grab yourself a cloth, and what you can do is just take the cloth and just remove the excess thermal paste. Sometimes it gets quite hard, and if that's the case, then you might have to rub a little bit harder, or very gently go over it with like a flat blade screwdriver, but very gently, obviously not putting any pressure on it at all. So take off the excess first of all, just with a cloth. Then grab yourself some isopropyl, some IPA, give it a spray onto the processor and onto the block of the heatsink as well. And then get a cotton bud or cotton stick, and then just go around removing any other excess you can get to. Don't worry too much if you don't get it all off around the sides, but where you should concentrate is actually on this silver square here. Again, same with the heatsink, just clean that up nicely. And the reason we're doing this is to make sure that the new thermal paste we're going to put on in a second just makes sure it's got a nice bond with both surfaces. So once that's nice and clean and nice and shiny, get yourself thermal paste. I normally put a blob in the centre and then a blob in each corner. I never actually know what the magic is of the correct amount of thermal paste, but I'm going with that. Get your heatsink. Now obviously it only goes one way round, and that way is where the power cable is to the connector on the motherboard. Just get it around the right way and then guide it through the holes. Connect up the power, flip it over like so, and then you need your brackets, your X bracket. Line it up roughly with the actual green legs which come through the motherboard of the heatsink, and then just start putting some pressure on them, just closing them down. Now obviously the one you get to last is the most difficult one, so you need quite a bit of pressure on there. Then just go around and just make sure they're clicked into place, and you should be able to rub your finger over there, and they shouldn't be protruding through the X plate, so it should be pretty much level. Okay, now that's done. What you need to do is grab your bottom chassis plate or base. Then with the ports at the back, you feed the ports in first of all. Make sure they're fitted through, and then just drop the motherboard in. Now on the underside there are a couple of black lugs which come through the chassis. So you need to make sure that they're aligned like so. They'll pop through. There's one there, and then one at the front that pops through just like that. So once that lug and that lug is through, you know it's home correctly. Now next thing, don't forget your little RF gaskets, your little shield that we took off just above the USB port. Give it a bit of a squeeze, and then it just slots over the actual chassis at the front there, just like so. Now you can start adding the components. So let's pop in our power supply first of all. Now this only goes in one way around, the actual connector. There's a little plastic lug which goes to the outside of the case. Push that in until it clicks. Like so. You'll hear it click, it's only a gentle click, and then wind the power supply in so the cable sits nicely above it. And these little lugs, there's some holes in the actual motherboard. Move it over, give it a wiggle, and it should nicely fit into those holes, just like that. Next, optical drive. Pop in the front end first of all, then connect the cables up. It's obvious which connections they go to on the motherboard because the cables only reach to one of them. And again, there's a couple of holes for the motherboard, for the Blu-ray drive to sit into, so just make sure that all the lugs are sitting through there. Next up, hard drive. Take it that way around, pull the cables out, like so. Connect the cables back up, and then fold it over the cables, and then just drop it into place. Now there's actually, on the power supply, this bit of plastic here connects. Let me show you that. This bit of plastic here sits over the actual power supply, and it all sits into place just like so. Now next thing is the screw guide, only goes in one way round. These little lugs at the front go to the front, and then there's little lugs at the bottom. So pop that in just like so. That sits there nicely. And grab your power board. Connector just under the Blu-ray drive pops on that way. Wi-Fi card, again connector, pops into the side there. Only one way around it can go, and pop that on. Now what I find the easiest thing to do is we need to flip it over and do the screws up. So I actually get the RF shield case and put that over first of all. At the front here there's a little bit of foam just on the back of the power board, so just pull the power board gently forward, don't unplug it, just gently forward so the RF shield drops down. Make sure it sits nice at home, and then you can flip the whole thing over without the components falling out and start adding your screws. Now Microsoft have made our life a little bit easier, bless them. Anything which is stamped as a C or a B is the silver screws. Anything that's an A is the black screws. Now F is the green screws. So let's start off with the silver screws, and so I'm going to be putting screws in anywhere where I see a C then a number or a B then a number. So that's all the silver screws. Now we're going to go to our black screws, and this is for the heat sink, and they are labelled A. Okay, now flip it back over, and what we need to do is put the black screws into the power board and into the Wi-Fi card as well. So there's 4 screws in the power board. Slide it around so we can get to the Wi-Fi card. 3 screws into the Wi-Fi card, that's 3 black screws. Okay, and that is all done. Next we need to put the top case back on, and the easiest way to do that is start at the front here, literally drop the case pretty much on, and as you're dropping it, slide it backwards a little bit towards the rear. Again, give it a wiggle and it will find its way home. Turn it up on its face and then just pop the side parts around like so. Make sure it's nice and flush. Before you do anything else, flip it back around and just make sure the buttons click like so. If you have troubles getting the case on, just check on the front of the Blu-ray optical drive. There's a couple of plastic lugs, I think 4 plastic lugs. On the underside of the case there's 4 holes for them to fit into, just make sure they're aligned. And then finally for screws, we need 6 green screws, and they all go into the holes which are labelled F. And they attach the case to the rest of the Xbox. Now do a quick visual check, make sure all the screws are in place. Now one thing you'll notice, there's a hole here which doesn't have a screw in it. Everywhere else should have a screw in it, so it should either be the green, the black, or one of the silver screws. But this hole up here remains empty. Now finally, get your base plate. This only goes on one way round. There's obviously the front here, you can see the bind button there, and then the hole for the USB port. So make sure you get it around the right way. Literally just place it over like that. Now, as you heard when we removed it, there was some clicking, and there's quite a lot of clicking when we put it back in again. At the rear here is obviously the little tab where the warranty goes. So just make sure it kind of goes over the tab and it all lines up, and then just give it a squeeze and then put some pressure on all the way around, and it clicks into place just like that, just do a quick test just to make sure the bind button clicks, the power button clicks, and the eject button clicks. Like so. Now that is that. So I hope you enjoyed this video. As I say, just a demonstration of a different way of replacing the retimer chip. Now I'm not saying it's a better way, certainly not than the other videos that are out there, but for me I found it a little bit easier because doing it without the solder paste, it's just difficult to actually get the retimer chip binding properly to the actual pads on the motherboard, and the solder paste certainly helps that by bridging that gap as you heat it up between the actual motherboard and the pads on the side and the rear or the underneath of the actual retimer chip. But it certainly is an easier way to do it if you haven't got a microscope, for example, because without the microscope you can't really see how all the solder is joined between the solder pads and the motherboard itself. So kind of with the solder paste, there's solder in between those two which is melted, so that did help me out doing it that way. So anyhow, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks very much for watching. I will leave a link in the description below to the solder paste that I use, to the thermal compound that I used as well in this video, and also a couple of tools which I use here at Bluebeam. So as I say, thanks very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Give us a thumbs up if you did. Please subscribe to the channel, it really helps us out. Thanks very much for watching. Bye bye for now.